Okay, let's be real. We've all been there, right? You're staring at this giant spreadsheet packed with survey responses, and you're just thinking, how do I turn this mountain of raw data into something I can actually use? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to walk through how to transform that wall of text into clear, powerful, and genuinely useful insight.
So you did it. You put in the hard work, you ran the survey, the responses are all in, and now you've got this. It's that classic moment where you're just sitting there with all this data, and the big question mark is just hanging in the air. What's the very next step to make it all worthwhile?
I think the best way to look at this is to frame it as a journey. Seriously, you're starting in this kind of chaotic place, this messy spreadsheet, and you're traveling to a point of total clarity, a place where the insights you uncover give you the confidence to make a real, informed decision.
Every good journey has a starting point, and for us, that's phase one, taming the data. This is all about the crucial cleanup work. It's where we bring some order to that initial chaos and really set ourselves up for success down the line.
So, first things first, let's get our hands dirty. You start by just checking the response rate, how many people actually saw it through to the end. Then, it's time to clean house. You're going to want to get rid of any incomplete responses or any answers that are just way out there, total outliers. And keep an eye out for straight lining. That's when someone just gets lazy and clicks, agree for every single question without reading. And finally, there's a key technical step. If you phrase any questions negatively, you have to reverse code them. This just makes sure all your data is pointing in the same direction for the analysis.
All right, with our data all squeaky clean, we can move on to phase two, the first read. This is where we start to get a feel for what we have and begin to understand the basic language of the responses we've gathered.
And that language really comes in four main flavors. First, you've got categorical data, which is just about sorting things into buckets, like what's your favorite color? Then there's ordinal data, which has a clear order to it, like ranking something from awful to amazing. And finally, interval and ratio data are your classic hard numbers, like someone's age or the temperature outside. It sounds a little academic, I know, but trust me, knowing what type of data you're working with is absolutely crucial because it dictates exactly what you can do with it.
And here is a perfect, super simple example of that first type, categorical data, in action. The question was, what is your favorite product feature? People pick from a list, and you can see right away, ease of use is the massive winner here at 45%. Boom. A simple, powerful insight right at the top level.
Now here's a golden rule for this entire process, something you really want to remember. Always, always start with the numbers. Get your quantitative analysis done before you dive into all those open-ended written comments. Why? Well, because the numbers give you a solid structure, a framework that helps you make sense of all those opinions later on.
Okay, now we're heading into what might just be the most critical part of this whole journey. In phase 3, we're going beyond just counting things. We're asking a much, much deeper question. Can we actually trust the story our data seems to be telling us?
And really, it all boils down to this one fundamental gut check. Before we get all excited about our findings, we have to stop and ask, were the questions we wrote any good in the first place? I mean, were they actually designed well enough to measure what we hoped they would measure? Any trustworthy data really rests on these two huge pillars. Think of it like this. Reliability is all about consistency. If you ask a similar question in a slightly different way, do you get a pretty similar answer? That's reliability. Validity, on the other hand, is about accuracy. Are you actually measuring what you think you're measuring? Are you hitting the bullseye? You need both, because you can be consistently wrong, right?
So how do we actually measure that first pillar, reliability? Well, there's a handy little tool called Cronbach's Alpha. It's a statistical test that checks for that internal consistency. It spits out a score between 0 and 1, and the simple rule of thumb is this. If you get a score of 0.7 or higher, it means your related questions are all hanging together and working as a team, just like you designed them to. So, once you've done that work, once you've established that your data is trustworthy, that it's both reliable and valid, that's when the real fun starts. Now you can dig in with confidence and start hunting for those hidden connections and patterns.
And the number one tool for doing that is something called cross-tabulation. Now, that sounds like a fancy, complicated term, but it's really not. It just means slicing and dicing your data in different ways. So instead of looking at everyone's answers all at once, you start comparing how different groups, say different age groups or different types of customers, answer the exact same question.
And just look at what happens when we do that. This chart is the perfect example. Your overall satisfaction number might have looked, fine. But when you cross-tabulate by age group, whoa, a completely different, much more powerful story emerges.
Check it out. The 35 to 54 group is super satisfied, while the younger group is way down at only 45%. This is the kind of game-changing insight you would totally miss if you didn't slice the data.
And that brings us to the final, and honestly, the most important phase of our journey, making it all matter. This is where we take everything we found and translate it into real-world, actionable insights that can actually drive change.
So how do we get from analysis to action? Well, it starts by using this new data to set some benchmarks, concrete goals for the future. Then, if you've done surveys before, now's the time to compare your results and track how you're doing over time. And finally, you pull it all together to answer the biggest question of all. What is this data really telling us we need to go and do next?
This quote from the source material just perfectly sums up the whole point. The goal of this careful, methodical process isn't just to make a few pretty charts. It's to literally transform a pile of opinions into a truly valuable strategic tool for your business.
But hang on, even after all that great work, we're not quite at the finish line. There are a few really common but pretty dangerous traps people fall into at the very end when they're interpreting the results. We need to make sure we know how to spot them and avoid them.
Here are the 3 big ones you've got to watch out for. First is the classic, confusing correlation with causation. Remember our chart? Just because younger people were less satisfied doesn't mean their age caused it. There could be something else going on. Second, don't put too much faith in averages. They can easily hide the really interesting details in the extremes. And finally, just be humble with your results. Always remember that the data reflects your sample, not necessarily the entire world.
So, if you take just one thing away from all of this, let it be this. Survey analysis is so much more than just a technical task. The real goal here isn't just to crunch the numbers. It's to listen really, really carefully and to understand the human story that the data is trying to tell you.
And that's really the perfect place to wrap things up. By following this journey from that initial chaos all the way to clarity, you're not just analyzing data anymore. You're becoming a storyteller. So the final question isn't for me, it's for you. What amazing story is your data just waiting to tell?